Ghost towns aren't supposed to come back. Once the jobs leave, the people follow, and the story ends. But a handful of places across America never accepted that ending. Some are pulling off genuine revivals. Others are fighting battles nobody expected. Here's what's actually happening on the ground. Number 12, Plymouth, Massachusetts, Priscilla Beach. Tucked along the coast of Plymouth, Priscilla Beach was once a quiet summer colony filled with small cottages, wooden boardwalks, and families escaping Boston heat in the early 1900s. At its peak, the area thrived, a tight-knit seasonal community built around beach life, simplicity, and tradition. But over time, things changed. As travel became easier and people sought bigger, more modern homes, the original cottages began to fall out of favor. Storm damage, rising maintenance costs, changing lifestyles led many owners to abandon or sell. By the late 20th century, parts of Priscilla Beach were in visible decline, aging structures, empty homes, and a fading identity. It looked like another coastal community headed toward quiet disappearance, but instead of dying, it evolved. In the 2000s, developers and new homeowners began buying up the old cottages, not to erase the past, but to rebuild around it. Many original homes were restored or carefully replaced, preserving the charm of the area while modernizing it. Property values surged. What was once a sleepy, partially abandoned beach enclave became one of the most desirable coastal neighborhoods in the region. Today, Priscilla Beach is alive again, but different. The old summer colony spirit still lingers in its layout and history, but now it's filled with year-round residents, renovated homes, and a new generation drawn to its coastal charm. What nearly faded away has been quietly reborn through investment and nostalgia. Priscilla Beach didn't come back the way it was, it came back stronger. And the next town on this list, it wasn't saved by the ocean, it was saved by something buried underground that people suddenly wanted again. Number 11, Bodie, California. By 1879, Bodie had between 8,000 and 10,000 residents, a red light district, and a reputation for violence that made national headlines. Then the gold ran out. By the 1940s, the last residents were gone, and Bodie should have vanished completely. Instead, it became something no one planned for. California designated it a state historic park in 1962 under a policy called arrested decay. Nothing is restored. Structures are stabilized just enough to prevent total collapse. Dishes still sit on the tables. Machinery rusts in place. Calendars are frozen in decades-old months. That deliberate authenticity became the product. Bodie draws tens of thousands of visitors each year, generating enough revenue to fund its own ongoing preservation. No one lives there. No businesses operate in the traditional sense, but the park sustains itself financially through its own frozen history, which might be the most honest form of survival a dead town can manage. What Bodie did with nothing, the next town did with even less, and it's now winning national awards for it. Number 10, Bisbee, Arizona. When Phelps Dodge shut down copper mining in Bisbee in 1975, the economic engine of the entire town switched off overnight. The Victorian buildings stayed because there was no money to tear them down, and gradually artists moved in, drawn by cheap rents and dramatic mountain scenery. That accident saved Bisbee. Galleries opened, then restaurants, then hotels. Architecture that survived only because of neglect became the main attraction. In 2024, Travel and Leisure named Bisbee the best small desert town in America. The Bisbee Visitor Center won Best Visitor Center in Arizona for 2025, welcoming over 100,000 visitors. But the challenges are real and getting harder to ignore. In 2025, a newly formed nonprofit called Bisbee Forward flagged a serious problem. Lodging was down 32.8% in September compared to the prior year, with bar and restaurant spending declining alongside it. Over 60 local businesses joined Bisbee Forward to build a coordinated marketing strategy, something the town had never had before. Bisbee's identity-driven revival is genuine, but identity alone doesn't pay the bills forever. And the next city knows exactly what happens when the bills stop getting paid. Number 9, Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth wasn't supposed to come back the way it did. For most of the 20th century, it thrived as a Great Lakes shipping and industrial hub. Iron ore, grain, and heavy industry drove the local economy. But by the 1970s and 1980s, deindustrialization hit hard. Manufacturing jobs disappeared, population declined, and large sections of the waterfront fell into disuse. Then the city made a decision that changed everything. It turned toward the lake instead of away from it. Beginning in the 1980s and accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, Duluth redeveloped its industrial waterfront into what is now Canal Park. Warehouses became hotels, restaurants, and shops. Public access to Lake Superior became the centerpiece of the city's identity instead of an afterthought. Tourism followed and kept growing. Today, Duluth draws millions of visitors annually. Healthcare and education, anchored by institutions like Essentia Health and the University of Minnesota Duluth, stabilize the economy. Remote work trends have also brought in new residents drawn by affordability and outdoor access. But it's not a perfect comeback. Winters are still brutal, population growth is modest, and economic diversification remains a work in progress. Duluth didn't reinvent itself overnight. It made one strategic pivot and committed to it for decades. That consistency is what turned a declining industrial port into a stable, livable city again. The next city on this list had the same question hanging over it, and the answer is starting to come in. Number 8, Gary, Indiana. Gary was purpose-built for steel. U.S. Steel founded the city in 1906. At its height, the population exceeded 170,000. Then came automation, foreign competition, and economic collapse. By 1994, Gary had the highest murder rate in the entire country. Today, the numbers are telling a different story. Gary's homicide count recently fell to 24, a 37% decline from the prior year, and a dramatic drop from a recent high of 64 in 2022. The city partnered with the University of Notre Dame School of Architecture to create a master plan for a walkable, revitalized downtown. An $85 million redevelopment of the historic Palace Theater, vacant for over 50 years, is underway, with construction starting in 2025 and completion projected for 2027. In August 2025, officials broke ground on Gary's first large-scale gated residential community in decades. Gary hasn't recovered, but the trajectory is real, and the residents living through it are starting to believe something has genuinely changed. That shift in belief, as much as any construction project, is what separates a city in motion from one still waiting. Number 7, Picher, Oklahoma. This one has no human comeback story, and that deserves to be stated plainly. Picher was once one of the largest lead and zinc mining operations in the world. Decades of extraction left behind chat piles, toxic waste mounds reaching 12 stories high, and lead contamination that leached into the soil and groundwater. By the 1990s, 34% of children in Picher had elevated blood lead levels. The federal government declared it a Superfund site. A tornado struck in 2008. The town was formally dissolved in 2013. The chat piles still stand. Cleanup is ongoing. Wildlife has returned to surrounding areas, and ecologists studying post-industrial landscapes now use Picher as a case study in how ecosystems respond when humans leave. It isn't a comeback in any sense most people would choose. It's a reminder that recovery takes different forms, and sometimes the land outlasts everything built on it. The first 7 entries ranged from frozen in time to actively toxic, but the next 5 are different. These towns didn't just slow their decline, they built something entirely new from what was left behind. The reasons they worked and the ways they worked are more varied than most people expect. Pay attention to what they have in common. Number 6, Paducah, Kentucky. Paducah didn't collapse in a dramatic way, it slowly faded. A river city at the confluence of the Ohio and Tennessee rivers, Paducah was once a regional hub for shipping and manufacturing. By the late 20th century, downtown vacancy was rising, historic buildings were deteriorating, and younger residents were leaving. Then, in the early 2000s, the city tried something almost no one else had attempted at that time. They paid artists to move in. Through the Artist Relocation Program, Paducah offered financial incentives, low-cost properties, and renovation support to artists willing to live and work in the historic Lower Town District. The goal wasn't tourism, it was population stabilization through creative industry. It worked. Dozens of artists relocated. Vacant buildings were restored, galleries, studios, and small businesses followed. The area gained national attention, and Paducah was eventually designated a UNESCO Creative City in 2013 for its contributions to crafts and folk art. The broader economy didn't magically transform, manufacturing didn't return, and growth remains modest, but the downtown core stabilized, property values improved, and the city built a distinct identity that didn't exist before. Paducah's revival is quiet, deliberate, and unusually intentional. It wasn't saved by geography or accident. It was saved by a policy decision that most cities wouldn't have risked trying. Number 5, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit's collapse was historic. In 2013, it became the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history, carrying an estimated $18 to $20 billion in debt. The population had fallen from 1.85 million in 1950 to under 700,000. Entire neighborhoods were demolished. The city became a global symbol of American industrial decline. Then something shifted, something almost no credible observer predicted a couple of decades ago. After more than half a century of continuous population decline, Detroit recorded its first population growth since the late 1950s in 2024, posting a higher growth rate than any other city in Michigan. The city gained nearly 7,000 people from July 2023 to July 2024, reaching a population of 645,705. In 2025, downtown Detroit logged nearly 31 million visits, up 3.5% over 2024, with 705 new residential units under construction and 957 additional hotel rooms in the pipeline. General Motors moved its global headquarters to the new Hudson's Detroit development. J.P. Morgan Chase's total investment in the city surpassed $2 billion. Detroit's comeback is real. It's also incomplete, uneven, and heavily concentrated in specific neighborhoods. Both of those things are simultaneously true, and the people still waiting for investment to reach their blocks know it better than anyone. Detroit gets the headlines, Buffalo doesn't. And that's exactly why what's happening there is worth understanding. This is a city that found a path nobody drew up in advance, and it's working in ways the big-name rivals aren't. Number 4, Buffalo, New York. Most people wrote Buffalo off decades ago. That was a significant miscalculation. Once one of America's wealthiest cities, its position at the western terminus of the Erie Canal made it a 19th century commercial powerhouse. Buffalo's decline was long and steep. The opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959 bypassed geographic advantage entirely. Steel and manufacturing collapsed. The population fell from 580,000 at its peak to around 290,000 by 2000. The recovery has been driven by several forces converging at once: the canal-side waterfront development, major investment from healthcare and education institutions, and significant state infrastructure spending. But the most unexpected driver was straightforward affordability. When coastal cities became prohibitively expensive, Buffalo's large inventory of intact Victorian and early 20th century housing became a genuine asset rather than a liability. Younger residents and entrepreneurs arrived specifically because they could afford to build something real there. Buffalo's population had stabilized. The city isn't chasing what it once was, it's building something suited to what it actually has. That turns out to be a far more sustainable position than most distressed cities manage to find. And the next town found that same lesson at 10,000 feet above sea level, in a place most people have never heard of. Number 3, St. Elmo, Colorado. St. Elmo is a name most people have never encountered, and that obscurity is precisely what saved it. Founded in 1880 during a silver and gold rush, St. Elmo peaked at around 2,000 residents and served as a key supply hub for surrounding mines. When the railroad pulled out in 1922, the town's reason for existing disappeared overnight. The population followed almost immediately. What kept St. Elmo standing was a combination of extreme isolation, perched at 10,000 feet in a mountain valley that made large-scale redevelopment economically impractical, and the sustained work of caretaker families who maintained the structures for decades. The buildings survived simply because nothing came along to replace them. Today, a seasonal general store operates. Some original structures serve as vacation rentals, and the town draws hikers, history enthusiasts, and off-road drivers consistently throughout the warmer months. It isn't dramatic, but it's alive and genuine, which at 10,000 feet in the Colorado Rockies is harder to sustain than it sounds. The next entry is the most unexpected one on this entire list. It didn't face decline at all, and that turned out to create an entirely different kind of crisis. Number 2, Sandpoint, Idaho. Forget decline. Sandpoint's problem is the opposite, and it's fracturing the community in real time. A small timber and railroad town on Lake Pend Oriel in northern Idaho, Sandpoint spent most of the 20th century as a quiet, affordable mountain community. Then remote work arrived, and the dynamic shifted almost overnight. Between the 2020 census and July 2023, Sandpoint's population grew by 15.8%, compared to a national average of 1.04%. Out-of-state buyers, primarily from California and Washington, arrived with cash offers that local residents couldn't compete with. Long-term renters had homes sold out from under them. At one point, Realtor.com listed only a single rental available in the entire greater Sandpoint area. Local real estate agents openly compared Sandpoint's trajectory to Aspen, Vail, and Jackson Hole, resort towns where longtime locals get priced out. The service industry collapses from lack of workers, and the original community gets replaced rather than revitalized. As of 2026, the average Sandpoint home value sits at $588,781 in a community where local wages remain well below the national average. Sandpoint's growth is visible and measurable. Whether it benefits the people who were already there is a completely separate question. And right now, the honest answer is that it largely hasn't. The final entry on this list faces the opposite problem, and the stakes couldn't be more different. Number 1, East St. Louis, Illinois. East St. Louis carries one of the hardest histories of any city in America, and what's happening there right now deserves more attention than it gets. Once a major industrial hub directly across the river from St. Louis, it was home to meatpacking plants, aluminum production, and rail freight operations that employed tens of thousands of workers. It was also the site of one of the deadliest race riots in American history in 1917, with estimates of 100 to 200 black residents killed, a trauma that shaped the city's geography, economy, and population patterns for generations. The population fell from a peak of around 82,000 to under 27,000. Poverty rates have historically exceeded 40%. Decades of disinvestment left entire blocks of the city without functioning infrastructure or viable housing. In September 2025, a $13 million affordable housing development called Winstanley Park opened in downtown East St. Louis. 38 apartments and townhomes that were fully occupied within months of going on the market. Behind that development sits a broader master plan. More than 220 new homes, a home repair fund for existing owners, new recreation facilities, and targeted commercial investment, according to the Illinois Housing Development Authority. 38 units is a fraction of what this city needs. There's no overstating that gap. But the development is real, it's funded, it's occupied, and it didn't exist 2 years ago. In East St. Louis, given everything this city has absorbed over more than a century, that constitutes genuine, measurable forward movement. Every town on this list came back in its own way. through art, location, resilience, or simply refusing to disappear. The ones actually thriving didn't try to recreate the past, they adapted to what they are now. And that made all the difference. If you've been to one of these places or have another in mind, drop it in the comments and subscribe for more stories that go deeper than the headline.